When across this country in 2016, there are those who are still trying to deny people the right to vote, we've got to push back twice as hard. Right now, in multiple states, Republicans are actively and openly trying to prevent people from voting, adding new barriers to registration, cutting early voting, closing polling places in predominantly minority communities, refusing to send out absentee ballots, kicking people off the rolls, often incorrectly. This should be a national scandal. We were supposed to have already won that fight. We're the only advanced democracy in the world that is actively discouraging people from voting. It's a shame. And then they try to justify it by telling folks that voter fraud is rampant. Between 2000 and 2012, there were 10 cases of voter impersonation nationwide. 10. People don't get up and say, I'm going to impersonate somebody and go vote. They don't do that. Meanwhile, some of the same folks who are trying to keep you from voting turn a blind eye when hundreds of thousands of people are killed by guns, imposing voter ID restrictions so that a gun license can get you on the ballot, but a student ID can't. Apparently more afraid of a ballot than a bullet. No, our work's not done. But if we are going to advance the cause of justice and equality and prosperity and freedom, then we also have to acknowledge that even if we eliminated every restriction on voting, we would still have one of the lowest voting rates among free peoples. That's not good. That is on us. And I am reminded of all those folks who had to count bubbles in a bar of soap, beaten trying to register voters in Mississippi, risked everything so that they could pull that lever. So if I hear anybody saying their vote does not matter, that it doesn't matter who we elect, read up on your history. It matters. We've got to get people to vote.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Listen, as you chime in, go ahead and do me a favor. Share this. This is going to be a very powerful and informative session on a topic that we don't talk a lot about in our community. But listen, I need you all to help us get the word out. We're getting ready to give you some information. As a matter of fact, grab your children. We want our young people all the way to our seniors to have this information about the importance of voting and using your voice. Now, you may see behind me the Oval Office. No, I am not in the president's office. I am not. But this conversation for the next few moments, it is going to share how your voice decides who sits in this chair. And understand that as a community, we have to step up. And we have to vote, and we have to make sure that our voice is heard. I see you all chiming in, and I see you commenting. Listen, do me a favor again, go ahead and share, invite someone to join, because we have 3 very qualified voices who's going to share with us during this hour. I want to first introduce to you, and please welcome to the set, if you will, Dr. Herbert Davis. Dr. Davis earned a BA in religion from Kalamazoo College. He has a Master of Divinity from Duke Divinity School, a Doctor of Ministry from Apex School of Theology, Ph.D. from Piedmont International University, He earned a leadership certificate from Leadership Education at Duke Divinity School, and he is the senior pastor of Nehemiah Christian Center in Durham, North Carolina. Welcome, Dr. Davis.
Well, thank you for having me, Dr. Grant. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, we're so excited about the information you're getting ready to share. You all go ahead and give Dr. Davis some hearts. You all know me. I'm a motivational speaker as well. And hearts motivate us to give you energy and to give you the information that you need. Listen, you all, next, please welcome Dr. Kendra Brown. Dr. Brown earned her BA in Political Science from Hampton University. She earned a Master of Divinity from Howard University. Any HBCU students out there. She holds a Master of Law from George Washington University Law School, a Juris Doctorate from Vermont Law School. She has studied at the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Kendra has developed policies working with the United States House of Representatives and is known in the Congressional Black Caucus. Listen, she is a bad sister. I tell her this offline. She is currently the lead public policy strategist for MasterCard. You all go ahead and give Kendra some hearts. Welcome, Dr. Kendra.
Hi, everyone.
Awesome. Oh my God. I see you all commenting. Listen, I see you sharing. You all, let's get this information for our community. All right. And last but not least, my friend and brother for probably over 25 years now, you all welcome Reverend Michael McBride. Reverend Michael McBride, he is a native of San Francisco, California, holds a Master of Divinity from Duke University with an emphasis in ethics and public policy. He is the senior pastor of the Way Christian Center in Berkeley, California. He is the director of Live Free campaign, which we will hear more about, and he leads hundreds, I want to say thousands. He leads thousands and thousands of faith congregations committed to addressing gun violence and mass incarceration. Listen, you can turn on your television anytime during the day and you will see him on New York Times, the Washington Post, MSNBC, CNN, the Huffington Post, and the list goes on. You all, please welcome our panelist, Dr. You're a doctor, Dr. Michael McBride. Yes, all the work you are doing in the community. Thank you all so much again for being here on tonight. Thank you so much. Listen, as stated, our topic is to inform leaders from the North, South, East, and West about the process of voting. I think, Dr. Davis, I was talking to you and Kendra, and I was sharing how my reflection in high school, we just kind of skirted over the topic and the importance of voting in school. You all want to speak to that just a little bit in your experience? Did they really put heavy emphasis on this? Pastor Mike, Kendra, Dr. Davis?
I'll go. No, there was not a great emphasis upon it. It was just kind of a blip on the radar screen. And I think I know it's problematic, but I dare say it might even be systematic in its efforts to keep people that look like us from understanding the value and importance of voting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I will chime in and say that, so one, my title is Director of Public Policy for MasterCard. So I want to make sure that, I'm not the lead strategist for the company. It's a whole team. And so that's my title. So I'll put that caveat in there. But no, this was not something that was emphasized in school. For me, it was left up to my parents. And a lot of parents don't have the conversation about the importance of voting. I know that in Congress, there is always strong advocacy for funding for civics education, and that would encompass really highlighting why it is important to vote. Some do include it in their, in their curriculum, but not all. And so it's not something that is standard across the board. And so, no, I agree with Dr. Davis on that point.
Yeah, and I'll just bring up the rear by saying, of course, the the lack of education and emphasis and training on civics and government has long been, I think, one of the key reasons why we have such an uninformed electorate at large. And many of us have had to learn it on the go because of our parents. Prayerfully, you may have went to a church that had a strong, active voting effort at the presidential election cycles, but not very much in between. So, yeah, it wasn't something that I picked up in any one of the urban schools I went to. I think we was just happy to go to class and make it home without getting shot, So yeah, I think it's something that we have to continue to work towards, educating younger people sooner than later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so important, even now, considering the climate of our world. Why is it so important that we have these intentional conversations with our children, with our congregations, within our organizations? Why is it so important, especially now?
Well, I'll just quickly say that, I believe this moment is arguably the most important election that we have before us, and not just at the federal level with the presidential candidates, but also we have to think about the Senate, we have to think about the House, we have to think about governors, we have to think about prosecutors and mayors, like all the way up and down the ballot. There is a rise of white supremacy, of fascist tendencies, of authoritarianism, and all those words you may not understand the full definition. Just trust me, it's all bad for Black people. All right. And so the key for us is to vote at a level where we can usher these white supremacists back into the cubby holes where they came from. And we can just deal with the regular white folks that, just don't like us that much. But, these fascists and other folk, we got to get them out of office. They are rising right in front of our eyes, and they are winning elections because Black people are not voting up and down the ballot. So it's very important for us in this election to register to vote. They're purging you from the rolls. You don't even know it until you show up to the polls to vote. So you have to check your voter registration, request the absentee ballot. I'm sure we'll talk more and more about that, but this is the time. We're 6 months out, about 5 months out. It's not too early. Matter of fact, for some of us, we may have missed an opportunity. So we got to make it up and get to cooking. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh my. Anybody else? Are you all okay with that response? That was really powerful, Dr. McBride.
Yeah, that was perfect.
I think it's critical that folks really understand that you have to vote the entire ballot. I think that is a critical point. I had my ballot and turned it in timely here in Maryland, and you have to keep flipping it over, right? Don't just stay on the first page, right? Flip it over and cast a vote on every single page. So the entire ballot, whether it's on a computer screen or it is home in your hand.
Yeah. And I think the brief thing I would add is that understanding of voting up and down the entire ballot is missed and off because I think it's connected to we don't understand how government works. Right. And so we tend to think, as McBride mentioned, this authoritarianism. Well, in our minds, I think we kind of have this notion that whoever's in the top seat gets to determine whatever happens, and that's not always the case. Right. And so when we don't understand that, we tend to vote, like it's been mentioned, every 4 years, get the president. The president tends to be right, or the governor is right, then we'll be okay. But there's so many other things that those who are systematically working the system in their favor, they understand that we don't, and it's costing us lives, not just votes and losses on ballots. It's costing lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just in my field of work, and I'm sure you all have heard in passing as well, I hear a lot of Black people. We're talking to our community tonight. I love everybody. Y'all know that, okay? But we are really talking to our community tonight. And I hear a lot of African Americans say that why vote? It doesn't matter. It's not going to make a difference. And then, just looking at our stats, most recently, even in 2016, the voter turnout ranged from 42 to 74% and averaging 59% nationwide. That's a huge gap of people that did not vote. And we're angry now, but you didn't vote. So what would you say, whether you're young or our seniors, and we're going to talk to our seniors too, and we want to thank you all for paving the way for even the rights that we have today. But what would you say to the person who would say, you know what, I'm not going to vote because it really doesn't matter. Nothing is going to change.
Your voice is your vote. And there are a lot of different ways that an individual can have an impact in their community. And voting is one of those ways. It is not the only way. It is one of those ways. I know we probably will talk about the Electoral College at some point in this conversation, but we know that someone can win the Electoral College and win the general election, and there is one result, but the winner of an election at the presidential level is the winner of the Electoral College, not the general vote. And there are a lot of individuals who don't really understand that. And that's why it is very important that your voice is your vote. And even in talking about down ballot, elections and key consideration, your school board, that is what you help to determine who sits on your school board, who the judges are, who our community and we appear in front of, who makes those decisions, who the prosecutors are, who bring the charges against individuals. Charging is a very powerful role that prosecutors have, and you want to be a part of deciding who those prosecutors are. And so I just think that people really have to understand, and we as a community must ensure that we are teaching people the importance of the entire election process, because we are the ones who put individuals in office. They represent us. They are our voice, whether we align with them on issues or not. They speak for us. They may not say what we want them to say at all times or at any time, really, but we are the ones who have an impact on who represents us.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'll also just quickly say, the right to vote is indeed the case that they are trying to limit our access to the ballot, and you heard people say if it wasn't so important, they wouldn't be trying to take it from you. But it's much deeper than that, right? It is about creating such distrust in the government, which, as Black people, we have a reason to be distrustful of the government because they have unleashed hell on our people over the years. But we also have to appreciate that our tax dollars, you pay taxes, that is what fuels both your local, state, and federal government. To not vote means that you are allowing someone else to decide how your money is being used to either support or harm your family. Police departments are funded by your tax dollars. The military exporting of violence and imperialism across the world is funded by our tax dollars. The lack of hospitals in the South during a pandemic is because of our tax dollars and policies being passed that are okay with Black people being in a vulnerable situation. So I tell our people, voting is an act of stewardship. It's not just an act of your political engagement. We are told and called as Christians to steward creation, right? And so if you don't vote, then you are actually allowing someone else to do the job that God has called us to do in this moment in time. So I tell my congregation, if you're not voting, your salvation is in peril. Somebody say amen.
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 Somebody type amen. Listen, if you're just go ahead. If you are registered, you can type I'm registered. We want to make sure our families are registered. We want to make sure we are registered to vote. Dr. Davis, Dr. Brown, and Reverend Mike, many in this generation don't really understand or know the history of voting. I'm going to ask you just to think about what you can share with us as it relates to the history of voting. But before we hear your voice, let's just go to a brief video from the New York Times, and let's just have a little moment of education, and then we'll come back to the panel.
In this scene from the 2012 movie, Abraham Lincoln spells out the terms of Reconstruction.
All they heard was the first time any president has ever made mention of Negro voting.
In 1865, he said freed slaves who were intelligent or had served as soldiers should be allowed to vote. The 14th Amendment, passed in 1868, guaranteed this right as part of the full citizenship accorded to African American men. But for much of the 20th century, voting remained a contentious issue. The 19th Amendment, ratified in 1920, gave women the right to vote, but the racial divide remained. Some states continued to limit voting, either through measures like the poll tax or direct intimidation of African American voters. In the South, there were even whites-only primaries. We shall This is Sam Tannenhouse of the New York Times. The first modern Civil Rights Act was signed by President Eisenhower in 1957. It created a federal commission authorized to enforce voting rights. Senator Strom Thurmond conducted the longest filibuster in history, more than 24 hours, in an effort to thwart the bill, but it passed.
The location for the meeting with Senator Rubicon.
Still, voting was not equal for all. Massive resistance in the Deep South was organized to keep blacks from the polls, and legal enforcement was hampered by all-white juries. Voting rights became a central issue in the civil rights movement.
I think this march will go down as one of the greatest.
In 1965, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. led the march from Selma to Montgomery for better voting laws. The nation was shocked by images of the marchers being attacked, and less than 5 months later, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It barred states and districts from curtailing the vote on the basis of race, color, or language.
It is wrong, deadly wrong, to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
Sections 4 and 5 of the bill included special provisions to ensure fair voting practices in a number of states, most of them in the South. Voting rights advocates say some citizens there continue to be disenfranchised. But the Supreme Court's close ruling on Tuesday, striking down Section 4, suggests that conditions have changed since 1965, and it is left to Congress to reconsider the act.
So we can see that we still have a lot of work to do. We've come a long way. What can you all add as far as a historical perspective? That was a little summary, but what can we share to help people understand where we come from and where we are now?
This is Kendra. Yes, I'll add that there are still barriers that are still being hard fought against, right? We saw that in the 2016 election, there were a lot of restrictive voting procedures that were in place, things that are still being, litigated, from the photo ID laws to cuts to early voting. There's felony disenfranchisement. The Department of Motor Vehicles, I know in the state of Alabama, they were closing, and they did close them leading up to the election, and so folks were not able to have the ID that they needed. And so there have been, efforts that have been outlawed at the state level since then, but there are still challenges. There has been a consolidation of polling places and in response to COVID-19, and then having a lot of the elections across the country, the primaries done by mail, we've already seen, attacks to access in that way. But then we just saw in the state of Georgia what happened, this week. There are a lot of disruptions that folks really need to be upset about, and just know that there are modern day practices that are happening. I know that it happened in North Carolina, in Durham, in the 2016 election, where in the middle of voting, in the middle of the day, the systems went out, right? And so we have to know that that happens. We have to know where it happens, and that folks have to be just as hard fought of protecting the right to vote and then actually exercise that right. But know that there are attacks to the ballot box that are still happening to this day. And that is because voting matters. If it didn't matter, then there would not be attacks there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I see you all. We see you all. You are typing that you're registered. This is really, really good. There are three basic types of elections: the primary, general, and local. I don't know if one person wants to take each, but I feel like we need to really educate our community on the impact that each election has. Again, you all, the three basic types of elections: primary, general, and local. All right. Go ahead and write that in the chat. I want, we write it. Research tells us that we'll retain it a little bit more. Okay. So write it wherever you are in the chat, on your notebooks, notepads, wherever. But again, the three basic types of elections: primary, general, and local. How does these three tiers of voting, how do they impact our communities?
Well, I think it's important to appreciate, as we often say, all politics is local, meaning that the closest you are to an elected official, the easier it is to hold them accountable.
Yes.
Your vote matters, I won't say exponentially more, but it matters, many, many times more when you're voting for a city council member, when you're voting for a school board member. The margin of victory is often determined by the size of a small storefront church in many of these elections. The person who is a prosecutor, who determines if your young person or your older person, for that matter, is going to have an opportunity for a light sentence or a long sentence, for a deferred sentence, or for a super harsh sentence. That is, again, determined usually by the size of a few of our congregations. And so it's really important for us to appreciate that local governance very much impacts the ability for we to determine how our communities are governed. As you go further up the food chain or the political governance chain, then your vote does get a little kind of consumed by many other voters, but you still have to appreciate that the accumulation of votes as a block of people allows us to have political power to hold people then accountable if they are not delivering the goods and the services for our community. So local elections are always about helping to determine the immediate governance of your own community, the conditions of your schools, the conditions of utilities, the conditions of the way police and prosecutors and judges. Many of us don't ever vote for judges, but you have to know that a judge usually is decided by a few votes, literally, like tens of votes. And judges, as we know, have all kinds of power to decide how our loved ones are impacted. So it's very, very important for us to vote as much as we can. Develop a muscle memory of voting regularly. Yes. Whenever you see an election, you ought to go vote. Whether it's for a dog catcher, you ought to say, well, you know what? I like dogs. I like cats. I like fish. Whatever you like to catch, go vote for that person and make sure that that person reflects the values of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They may not always reflect your theological values, but you ought to vote for somebody who's going to champion at least us staying alive and having access to freedom of movement, freedom of opportunity, and work on all the other things, on a prayer meeting or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else want to add to those 3 tiers of
I learned that from Davis.
Well, I think the one thing that I would add, because I think McBride did a very good job, but I would add, and he mentioned that the local election is the place where you can get your hands dirty in holding someone accountable.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, for me personally, I think if you're a conscious person, when you get that appetite, when you whet the appetite of holding someone accountable, it makes you think, wow, if we could do this at this level, what if we could organize and mobilize at a larger level? And I think sometimes the challenge is because we don't value all the elections, we're going after what's that proverb? How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Right.
We're trying to swallow the whole elephant and not realizing that before we can even get there, we're struggling with local dynamics. Our children are not being handled right in the school systems, so yes, I think it's recognizing all levels and then getting yourself, like McBride said, that muscle memory, getting involved. And that way you can hold people accountable and start to move your way up.
Yeah. So you all really comprehensively what they're saying is do not wait for the presidential election to go and offer your vote. Every tier matters. Every tier matters. All right. And so we really, really hope you all hear that tonight. Kendra, you mentioned when we first started our discussion tonight, you talked about the Electoral College. Can you share with us a little information and just kind of inform our community? What is the Electoral College, the impact that it has? How does it impact us?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for that question. So the Electoral College is a body of electors that is established by the U.S. Constitution, and it forms every 4 years with the sole purpose of deciding the president and the vice president of the United States. It is comprised of 538 electors, and an absolute majority of 270 votes is required to win the presidential election. And so the number of each state's electors is equal to the sum of the state's membership in the Senate and the House of Representatives. So that's how you get the number that each state has in the Electoral College. So currently, of course, there are 100 senators and 435 representatives. And so I'm sharing this just for information so that everyone has it. In the last election, you had the current president received 45.93% of the popular vote. Secretary Clinton received 48.2% of the popular vote. So she received more, but he received 304 votes in the Electoral College, and she received 227. And because he received more, he won the election. And so 270 is that magic number. That is the number that is needed to win the Electoral College. And so when a young person or anyone says that their vote doesn't matter, it does. And that's how it matters in the grand scope. Now, in the presidential, election, but it matters local, state, federal. And so if anyone ever says that their vote doesn't matter, just look at the numbers. It actually, it absolutely does. But that is the breakdown of what the Electoral College is and how the numbers actually play out.
Yeah, I know that helped somebody tonight, because that's not a discussion or, conversation that our young people are having. And so thank you for that, Dr. Brown. And we see a lot of questions and chats, and we're going to have a moment at the end where you all can ask our panelists specific questions. But Dr. McBride or Dr. Davis, did you want to add anything to the conversation of the Electoral College?
I'll just say, I'm not a doctor. I'm a bootleg preacher with an MDiv. But all the rest of y'all are doctors, because y'all earn them joints. Praise God. I will say that to Dr. Brown's point, amen. That those electoral college votes were awarded because largely voter suppression in Wisconsin. And also a lack of enthusiasm, some voter suppression in Michigan, kept people from being able to really cast their ballot as well. Several things I think we just have to remember. Philadelphia, Wisconsin, and Michigan, I think the margin of victory in those states were less than 70,000 votes.
That's right.
Which means that is as close in an election where 55 million something votes were cast, and it's less than 70,000 votes. That is as razor thin of a margin between three states that you can get. And so it's really important for us to know that people are going to have voter irregularities, because in the Black community, unfortunately, this has been the legacy of our participation. The state, when I say the state, the country has always tried to keep Black people from voting. So we need to plan ahead so we can turn out enough people in these states to overwhelm the numbers, so the Electoral College is not in play in a way that overrides the popular vote. And I also will say that voting early was another reason that a lot of these states had lower numbers. The Republicans and others tried to limit early voting. They tried to limit people's ability to vote absentee ballot or vote by mail. These are all voter suppression tactics. And this is why it is very important for Black church people to be particularly critical of any loyalty to the Republican brand of politics in this moment, because they are doing everything they can to keep Black people from being able to vote. Even if you feel like you care about some of the culture war issues that some of us seem to be obsessed about, they are trying to keep you from voting, because they know that 90% of Black people will not vote for their agenda. So what does that tell you about their loyalty or concern about your rights as a citizen of this country? That they want to keep you from voting so they can keep the power and decide what is best for our people and our communities? No, the devil is a lie. You and I need to call it out very plainly that this kind of political gamesmanship, dishonesty, is one disqualifying factor I believe any Black person should have, regardless of the issues. If they're trying to keep you from voting, then you ought not vote for that kind of political program or project. And the Electoral College becomes then the way for us to ensure that we have a massive turnout, so we don't have the popular vote being overridden by the Electoral College vote.
Wow. Such good information. Pastor Mike, okay, we'll just give you Dr. McBride within our circle offline, but online we're going to say Pastor Mike. And we respect you because you are on the front line doing the work and informing us. And so thank you. But you kind of lead us into our next point of conversation, and that is identifying the barriers. I don't think a lot of us really know the efforts behind the scene to attempt to stop African Americans from voting. You mentioned just a few, but please help us Let's just call it out and put it out in the atmosphere so that our community is very well aware. Voter ID laws, felons, and it's a whole gamut of things. So please speak to that. Speak to that.
There have also been large disinformation campaigns. And the disinformation, it's been documented. It still persists, and we can't have a conversation about what's happening without talking about the disinformation, where there will be information about the wrong polling place, saying that it's closed. There are all types of things, and that was targeted specifically to the Black community. And there are reports that have been issued on that. There have been hearings in Congress. There was a report that was done in the fall of 2018 that really documented that well, about the efforts specifically to sow discord in the Black community. So the Black community has been targeted, continues to be. And so I think that folks really need to understand that there is a disinformation war that is still going on, and just need everyone to be aware of that. And even when you're sharing information, I know that Twitter, I just saw this this week, Twitter is, they put a mechanism up where prior to a person sharing an article, there's a mechanism for you to state actually whether you actually read the article before you shared it, right? So that is an acknowledgement of the disinformation that is out there. And sometimes folks just don't take the time to share what pops up in your newsfeed, but not everything in your newsfeed is authentic. And not everything in your newsfeed is something that needs to be shared. And so that's a whole another conversation about the cyber warfare that is still going on. But folks really need to be educated on the fact that Black communities are targeted and have been targeted because they know the power of the Black community. So just want to ensure that everyone is aware of what is continuously happening. And there are a lot of individuals and members of Congress and governors who are fighting that. But we have to just know that it is happening.
And then another piece, thank you, Dr. Brown, it's so true. Another thing is this whole issue of gerrymandering and redistricting. I mean, that's a major thing that's been happening in North Carolina.
Yes.
I've been here 25 years, and it's just amazing how, when you hear the term, I think I'm pretty intelligent, so I hear it, I understand it in principle, and you're like, okay, that's crazy. But then when you get involved and you start seeing how they're going about redistricting, I mean, they're drawing lines as if they are an infant child with a magic marker, and they're drawing lines intentionally to cut out Black and brown people from running. I don't remember exactly where it was. I think it's somewhere up in the Greensboro area. But there was a couple elections ago, there was some redistricting done. It was fought. And then the incumbent, when it was defeated in court and they had to go back and redo it, the incumbent didn't even decide to run because they knew with it being drawn appropriately, there was no way they could win. And it's like, when you understand this, there is like Mike keeps saying, there's an intentional effort to carve out and cut away Black and brown people from being able to participate in systems that were put in place. And I think the reason for it oftentimes is because when this country put systems in place, they didn't put them in place for us. And so when we fought to get in there and they couldn't hold us out, now we got to change the rules and keep changing the rules and keep changing the rules. And we have to participate because it's like, if we don't understand this, who's going to make the determination when you have a lawsuit against gerrymandering? It's a judge that was elected somewhere, that if we didn't have any input in that, then we don't get to have any way of correction.
And shame on you Black preachers who would carry water for these Republicans in a moment like this.
Talk,
Shame on
McBride.
you. Shame, shame, shame. I pray for your soul. I pray for your head. You are literally supporting people with Ku Klux Klan tendencies who have no desire to keep you or your family safe. They are parroting to you these ideas around abortion and gay marriage, and you just act like, as a black preacher, where your members vote 90% in a totally different direction. It is mostly black male preachers who are conservative leaning in their social or sexual ethics, and they will go and support the Ku Klux Klan like politicians who are trying to keep your members from voting. I just don't understand it. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. And I pray that God gives some of us a revelation between now and November. Because if we do not vote with a level of intensity and intellectual clarity, we will be arguably hastening the demise of this country's ability to function. This pandemic is not going away anytime soon. The kind of economic devastation that is on the deck from this pandemic is not going away anytime soon. We need somebody at every level of government who has a clear thought about how to make sure the government works for everybody, not just the people you like, not just the people that look like you, not just the people that speak in tongues and go to your churches, everybody. That is stewardship of the earth. And so I pray that we do not continue to support politicians and political projects that are gerrymandering us, that are eliminating early voting, that are putting up voter suppression tactics. Why would we support people that are trying to keep you from voting and having political power so they can decide? Shame on you, preachers. I pray that the Lord give you what you need to back away from that table of death that you keep eating from. In Jesus' name.
In Jesus' name. And I would even add this, that I think and McBride is hitting it out the park. But it also speaks to the fact that the people that McBride is telling us to watch out for, they're not just voting, they're organizing. Their efforts of misinformation, their efforts to find who they can go pull to step up and to be their puppets and their parrots, that's a part of their strategy. It's the organizing. Yes. And sometimes because we don't vote enough as a people, we're fighting to get you to vote. And then when it comes time to talk about the mobilization and organizing after the vote, we can't get there. And so what's happening is, even if it's the other people that are fighting against us, they're not outnumbering us total, quote unquote, with the vote. They're out organizing us. That's why they're trying to keep us from voting, because they know if we ever wake up and organize and vote in an appropriate way, that something powerful will happen. It makes no sense. I mean, in some of these states, these whole voter ID laws, and I see preachers say, so you mean to tell me that within 18 months, somebody can't go get an official ID? Come on now. Don't play down to black folk. Don't insult us. I'm like, but do you not understand that you're trying to argue like this is just a small potatoes? We're talking about, there's never been this requirement. And requirements to qualify yourself to vote beyond being a citizen is stuff that they've always done to our people. And now, since they're trying to change it in a different way, and we're still so uncritical in our ability to think, that we're gobbling up this stuff left and right. And
it's important to say, again, to your point, not only are they organizing, but they're strategizing. They have done the research to find out what are the things that are most difficult for black folk in certain income brackets to access. What are the things that we don't like to access? People that don't have driver's license or federal government IDs may not be able to access them because they have fines, because the DMVs have been shut down in their area, and it takes them a day to go find one. A year and a half, how many days off do most people get to be able to go spend a whole day standing in line, paying fines just for you to vote? Understand that these white folk are sitting in rooms trying to figure out ways to impact you and your family, and they don't even have to come tell us the strategy that they're doing, because we got Negro preachers who were willing to help make it make sense. God forbid that in this election we fall for that kind of okie doke. Please, please. That's why I love black women in the black church. Because black women in the black church will nod as the preacher is talking and ignore everything they got to say and go do what they need to do to save their families. And so I just hope that we got some brothers who will get as smart as the sisters in the pew and in the pulpit, for that matter, because this is the most important election from the top to the bottom. We cannot allow foreign interference, the propaganda that is going to come on your timeline about Biden and whoever is the Democratic vice president. They are already developing ads that they're going to boost by $1 million. Trump already said it. They're going to pay $1 million worth of Facebook and Twitter ads. So when your Twitter page or your Facebook opens up, you wonder why all these ads are popping up. That's not because of God's divine providence. God's not trying to tell you something. That's because you got some wicked white folk who are Republicans that's trying to deceive you and bewitch you so you can believe a lie. So I'll stop talking because, I go about this all day. It is very, very important for us to be smart and be clear about the devil's devices, not be ignorant about how the devil's trying to move.
Man, this is so good. I pray that you all are receiving this information from I call them my scholarly friends. These are my smart friends. I call them when I need answers. Listen, Dr. Davis, you said something so key. You said they are not outvoting us. They are out organizing us. And so that brings us to the next steps. I want to share with our community, what should we be doing now? I know it goes beyond November, but even now in June, what are the next steps for our community? What should we be doing now as we lead and as we progress? We're protesting now. Some unfortunately are rioting, but after the protest, what is the process? What is the process? And can take us down that journey. What's the process?
We should call on Dr. Davis first.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I will say one of the first things we have to do is we need people to register. You need to register to vote. And then I think something that I've tried to articulate, this divide over, because sometimes when you do community organizing, people start to have this divide about protest versus organizing, and protest doesn't work. But no, protest works. Protest, it serves its job and serves its role very clearly. It gets attention. It causes people to take note. The question is, after we take note, do we have viable plans that are organized that can help lead and take our people to someplace? And then another thing that I think for our community, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this, is we have to learn to get unite behind plans that benefit all of us, and stop getting caught up in who's in charge and who's leading. It's not my name out front. Well, we need to unite around what's best. And this is where we talk about that strategizing. It's the idea of making sure that people are registering to vote, the get out to vote. When it comes time to vote, are we going to start using our vehicles that we claim the prosperity of God has provided us to help take somebody else to the polls? And then are we going to have conscious awareness amongst our congregations to participate in efforts of holding people accountable after we elect them? As soon as you get somebody elected, you don't wait until they do something that you didn't like. You need to turn around and say, if they're elected, you voted. Let's have some conversation. Let's talk about what the agenda should be. One thing that I've learned through my organizing, through one of the models we work with, is don't go to power for a decision, but go to power with a decision. So sometimes the problem is we sit back and want to go to massa and say, can you do this for us? Instead of organizing ourselves saying, hey, this is what we want you to do. This is what you need to do. And that type of thing comes from organizing and taking the efforts. And I think the platforms that we say we voted for and trying to develop strategic and well-organized plans to address those, because we have quality thinkers in our community. Yes. We have people who can put plans together. We just need to get to the table and recognize, and sometimes pastors, I'm coming for the pastors, sometimes we have to recognize we may be the pastor, but we're not the most informed to be the one who's going to help craft the plan. Find the people who can craft the plan, and then you can go out and declare the plan that they crafted, and maybe people can unite around it. It's this type of effort, and I'm just kind of skirting some things, but this is the type of effort that's needed to help bring about transformation after we've also been participating in voting.
Yeah, Dr. Kendra, we're coming to you, but you all keep hearing us say, make sure that you are registered to vote. You can go online and check to make sure that your name is there. You want to make sure that you are included. You will get confirmation in the mail. If you're not getting anything, there is a problem. You want to make sure that you are registered. Dr. Brown, please speak to our next steps. What should we be doing?
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with everything that Dr. Davis said. It was so just wonderfully shared. I agree that you have to hold individuals accountable. I think that another key point is to have ongoing conversations with your elected officials so that they get to know you, so that it's not you only coming when you need to ask for something, but that there's a continual conversation. They understand that at least once or twice a year at a minimum, there is a conversation with those who you are a part of, so that they know, like, oh, okay, it's June, so I know that I'm going to have a conversation because there's going to be an advocacy day, or invite them to a roundtable conversation. Maybe it has to be virtual. We're in a virtual environment now, but have those conversations that are consistent so that they know who you are. And there are many of us who are part of organizations. I'm a part of a sorority, and our sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, we have AKA's Lead. That's the name of our connections plan and our social justice plan, right? And so we organize around that core set of principles, just as other organizations do, just like Black Lives Matter. They have a core set of principles that they advocate for. And so having that knowledge to really distill down what your key priorities are, that's what you organize around. But you have to have that conversation and have that strategy in mind to know these are the key issues that we are going to advocate for. And then, as Dr. Davis said, just move forward. But I would just say, folks really have to understand how important it is to know your local elected officials and have them come and speak with you. They were elected by your community, whether you voted for them or not, but they still do represent you. And so you have to have those conversations, and they have to be consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Dr. Brown and Reverend McBride. We see your comment. You all please look in the thread there. He just put a website for you to go and check to make sure that you are registered. rocks.online/vote, okay, /vote. And so we know that Reverend McBride, again, I said it, that he is like on the front line, director of Live campaign. I know, McBride, that during the time of crisis here in Charlotte, you helped my husband and I mobilize our community, and we partnered with other churches to get out there to make sure our community was registered to vote. And so please, can you share, perhaps there's a leader of an organization that is watching tonight, what are some things that they can partner with you to do to make sure that their community is informed and that they are empowered to vote?
Yeah, I think that the tool ROCS, ROCS, which stands for Rebuilding Our Collective Strength. Make sure you type in ROCS, not make sure you type in ROCS, not ROCKS, or one word. ROCS stands for Rebuilding Our Collective Strength. Jesse Jackson says that our defeats are characterized by the fracture of our coalition and the margin of despair. Those votes that determine our inability to secure electoral victories is about our despair and our inaction. And so when we came to Charlotte at the invitation of you and many others on the heels of the Keith Lamont Thomas killing, there was an election that was coming up, and we were sitting in a meeting with a lot of the clergy, and they were talking about how many of them were very much in support of, I think, the most recent governor or a collection of bills that were about the transgender bathroom, if we remember, and they had snuck in that bill a provision that you could not look at the police shooting videos. Those videos were to remain private. And they didn't even know that was in the bill because the Republicans were telling them that this bill about bathrooms was the most important thing in the whole world to talk about. And so it required all of us to not only appreciate that some of us had been duped, but that now we had to do a Herculean effort to get people to the polls to go vote. And so folks use their congregations to set up phone banking stations. We have the ability to help you set up a phone banking station at your congregation. We have tools that will allow you to do mass text messaging and mass emails using the tools that other campaigns use to help win these elections. Part of the Black Church PAC's effort, and a PAC is a political action committee. It is a container that allows us to do explicit political work without putting at risk our 501c3s as churches or denominations. This entity allows us to be able to do work that we know is explicitly about defeating a Republican agenda and or helping to amplify the kind of political leaders that we want to get into office. And so I'll just say to you all that are listening, let's make sure that we use our buildings, which are assets that our ancestors for decades, even long before we got there pastoring, they built the Black church for us to use as a vehicle. Use your building, use your people. Your people are some of the biggest valuable gifts you will have. And even if you only have 25 people, you setting one day a week to phone bank with 10 to 15 people can reach tens of thousands of voters over time. That is an amazing capacity that most folks just don't have. So your buildings, your people, and then your own voice. Educate yourself and then amplify using your platform on Facebook, social media, Twitter. Send out these messages. Go to Black Church PAC on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Repost these messages. We'll curate the messages for you. We just need you to share those messages. Let's use our voices and our platforms and our churches and our buildings and our people as a megaphone to amplify, particularly when the election cycle is rolling around. Then your smaller church can have a mega impact and save a lot of lives of people that will never come to your church on a Sunday, but prayerfully they'll be alive long enough to experience life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, this has been so good, you all. We didn't want to stay online too long, but we wanted to make sure that we provided a very healthy and informative conversation for you all surrounding the importance of voting. All of us should have a response to what's going on in the climate of our world. And they will all be different. But one thing that should be universal is that we are voting from the local all the way to the top. All right. So we absolutely need to vote. Dr. Davis, please, you are a strategic developer and planner. Please tell the people how to connect with you. Perhaps there's someone who wants to connect with you where you can come and give them a plan surrounding this topic. How do they connect with you?
Yes, thank you. You can go to my website, hrdchristianleadership.com, hrdchristianleadership.com. Also a Facebook page under that same name. And we'd be glad to come in and see how we can help.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, that was hrdchristianleadership.com. Please contact Dr. Davis there if you need assistance. And what city and state are you in, sir, just for the people?
I'm in Durham, North Carolina, inside the county line.
You do travel when the pandemic is over.
But yes, we'll travel and we'll Zoom and Google Hangouts all through the pandemic. So still, yes.
Dr. Brown, how do individuals connect with you? Should they have additional questions,
Yes.
comments, concern, or your services?
Sure, thank you. So I'm on LinkedIn under my name, Kendra Brown, also on Twitter at Ms. Kendra Brown, and I'm on Facebook as well.
Awesome. And I'm telling you, you want to connect with Kendra on all of her social media platforms. You all, when I introduced her, I just read a few bullet points. But again, I'm telling you, this is a very, very just tenacious and resilient woman. And I'm just happy to be connected to you, Kendra, during this season and being partnering to impact our community. So please, you all, even right now, go ahead and follow her Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Make sure you stay connected to Dr. Kendra Brown. She's somebody that you want to know. Listen, everybody needs to be connected to Dr. Reverend Michael McBride. McBride, please tell us, how do we connect with you, your organization, and what you are doing?
Well, again, it's great to be connected. First and foremost, all these powerful tongue-talking doctors on the phone. Y'all make me want to go back to school, and I'm gonna go one day. You can follow us. Black Church PAC is our social media handles. You can follow me personally. I'm Pastor Mike _, and I'm on Twitter, Instagram. You can go to livefreeusa.org. Also sign up and follow us. We have all kind of organizers and trainers all across the country that are helping us to curate trainings that are both for C3 and what you are doing. Oops. And what we are doing, voting, all that kind of stuff. I thought I heard the voice of the Lord speaking to me, telling me what am I doing? I was like, I'm trying to do your will, Lord. Just help me. Be in touch. I'm Pastor Mike _. So put the _ at the end of Mike. Find us on livefreeusa.org, and we'll get a chance to follow up with you and be excited to do so.
Awesome. Want to make sure we got that right. Is that right, Reverend McBride?
That is right. Thank you so much.
All right, you all please follow him. He's an Instagrammer, so he posts more on Instagram than anything in Twitter. So you all follow him there. Make sure you stay connected. Listen, again, you all, thank you so very much. We're going to exit with just a brief video for our audience. But again, Dr. Herbert Davis, Dr. Kendra Brown, Reverend Michael McBride, thank you all for taking the time to educate our community. Please, everyone, remember that your voice matters, and we encourage you, we employ you, please vote and make sure that your community and your families are registered to vote. God bless you, and we'll see you all next time.
Police brutality, not on our watch. Poor healthcare, no sir. Our voting system is broken. It changes when we change it. We rise up as one. We speak out for our black lives. In 2020, we show up to the polls. Your vote is your microphone. So get in the booth and turn yours up. Reclaim your vote. You dig? Go to BET.com/reclaim your vote for more on how to register.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.